Take a look around your life for a second. The phone in your pocket, the food in your fridge, the clothes in your closet, the roads you drive on, the internet you use every day. None of these things appeared by accident. They are all the result of people creating value, producing goods, and working together on a massive scale. Now, here's a question that has puzzled people for centuries. Why are some countries rich while others remain poor? Why can one country build world-class cities, advanced technology, and high living standards, while another struggles to provide basic necessities? Most people today think the answer is obvious. Maybe rich countries have more natural resources. Maybe they have more money. Maybe they got lucky. But over 250 years ago, a Scottish thinker named Adam Smith asked the same question and came up with an answer that completely changed the way we think about wealth. His book, The Wealth of Nations, is often considered the foundation of modern economics. And the first big lesson from this book is surprisingly simple. A nation's wealth is not determined by how much gold it owns. It is determined by how much value it can create. That might sound obvious today, but in Adam Smith's time, it was a revolutionary idea. Back in the 1700s, many governments believed that wealth was basically a pile of gold and silver. The more precious metals a country collected, the richer it was considered. Governments competed to accumulate gold. They restricted trade. They controlled markets. They treated wealth like treasure locked inside a vault. Adam Smith looked at this idea and saw a major problem. Imagine two countries. Country A has huge reserves of gold. Country B has very little gold. At first glance, Country A seems richer. But what if Country B has factories, skilled workers, engineers, farmers, inventors, and businesses that produce useful products every day? What if Country B is constantly building, creating, improving, and innovating? Which country would actually become wealthier over time? Smith argued that Country B would win because real wealth doesn't come from storing things, it comes from producing things. Gold sitting in a vault doesn't feed people. Gold doesn't build houses. Gold doesn't invent medicine. Gold doesn't create jobs. People do. This was one of the most important shifts in economic thinking ever made. Smith believed that the true wealth of a nation comes from its ability to produce goods and services that improve people's lives. Think about it this way. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and every dollar in your bank account doubles overnight. Sounds great, right? But what if all the stores are empty? What if there is no food, no electricity, no fuel, no transportation, and no products to buy? Would you really be richer? Probably not. Money itself isn't wealth. Money is just a tool. The real wealth is the stuff money allows you to buy. The food, the housing, the healthcare, the technology, the services, the products, the things people create. This idea seems simple, but it changes everything. Because once you understand that wealth comes from production, you stop asking, how can we get more money, and start asking, how can we create more value? That's a completely different mindset. It's true for countries, it's true for businesses, and it's true for individuals. Think about successful companies. The companies that become incredibly valuable aren't usually the ones sitting on piles of cash. They're the ones creating products and services that people actually want. When people talk about companies like Apple or Amazon, they're not valuable because they own stacks of money. They're valuable because they create things that millions of people find useful. The same principle applies to individuals. Many people spend years chasing money directly, but the people who build lasting wealth often focus on something different. They focus on becoming useful. They develop skills, they solve problems, they create value for others, and as a result, money follows. Adam Smith understood something that remains true today. The more value you create, the more wealth you can potentially generate. This is why productivity matters so much. Productivity simply means how much output can be produced with a given amount of effort. Imagine two farmers. One farmer can grow enough food to feed 5 people. Another farmer can grow enough food to feed 500 people using better tools and better methods. Which farmer contributes more wealth to society? The answer is obvious. The second farmer creates far more value. Multiply that idea across millions of workers, businesses, and industries, and you start to understand why some nations become prosperous. The countries that produce more tend to become wealthier, not because they're magically better, not because they're luckier, but because they have systems that allow people to create more value. This is where Adam Smith's ideas become incredibly powerful. He wasn't just trying to explain money, he was trying to explain civilization itself. Why do modern societies have such high standards of living compared to previous generations? Why can ordinary people today access things that kings couldn't have imagined a few hundred years ago? Air travel, smartphones, instant communication, advanced medicine, online education. These things exist because human productivity has increased dramatically. People learned how to create more value with the same amount of effort, and that's the real engine of wealth. When Smith looked at prosperous societies, he didn't see mountains of gold. He saw productive workers. He saw businesses. He saw trade. He saw innovation. He saw people cooperating to create things that no individual could create alone. That insight may sound straightforward today, but it laid the foundation for modern economics, and it leads directly to the next major idea in the Wealth of Nations. If productivity creates wealth, then the obvious question becomes, how do people become more productive? How can one worker produce more than 10 workers used to? How can entire societies dramatically increase their output and standard of living? Adam Smith's answer would become one of the most famous ideas in economic history. It's called the division of labor. And according to Smith, it is one of the most powerful forces ever discovered for creating wealth. That's where the story really begins. If Adam Smith had to pick one idea that explains why modern societies became wealthy, it would probably be this. People become far more productive when they specialize. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But according to Adam Smith, this single idea helped transform human civilization. In fact, one of the most famous chapters in The Wealth of Nations begins with an example that still gets discussed more than 250 years later. The example wasn't about kings, governments, or giant corporations. It was about something incredibly ordinary. A pin factory. At first, that doesn't sound very exciting, but the lesson hidden inside that little factory changed economics forever. Imagine one worker trying to make a pin completely by himself. He has to pull the wire, cut it, straighten it, sharpen the point, attach the head, polish it, package it. Every step requires time and attention. Because he keeps switching between different tasks, his output stays low. Adam Smith estimated that one worker doing everything alone might produce only a small number of pins in an entire day. Now imagine a factory with 10 workers, but instead of each worker making complete pins, every worker focuses on a single task. One pulls the wire, one cuts it, one sharpens the point, one attaches the head, another packages the finished product. Suddenly, something remarkable happens. The factory's output explodes. Instead of producing a few pins, the workers collectively produce tens of thousands of pins. The increase isn't small, it's massive. And that's the power of division of labor. When people specialize, productivity rises dramatically. Today, this idea feels normal because we live inside a highly specialized world. But think about how strange modern life really is. Very few people grow their own food. Very few people build their own homes. Almost nobody manufactures their own smartphone. Instead, everyone focuses on a narrow set of tasks. A teacher teaches, a plumber fixes pipes, a programmer writes software, a truck driver transports goods, a doctor treats patients. Each person specializes in one area and relies on everyone else for the rest. The result is a level of productivity that would have seemed impossible in Adam Smith's time. Take your smartphone as an example. Think about how many people were involved in creating it. Someone designed the processor, someone engineered the camera, someone wrote the operating system, someone mined the raw materials, someone manufactured the screen, someone transported the components, someone assembled the final product, someone marketed it, someone sold it. No single person understands every step. No single person could build the entire device alone. Yet, millions of smartphones are produced every year. That's division of labor on a global scale. The modern economy works because people specialize. Without specialization, the world would look completely different. Imagine if every person had to produce everything they needed. You would need to grow your own food, build your own shelter, make your own clothes, generate your own electricity, create your own tools, repair everything yourself. Most of your time would be spent simply surviving. There would be very little time left for innovation, creativity, education, or progress. Specialization changes that, because when people focus on one thing and become really good at it, society becomes far more efficient, and that efficiency creates wealth. One way to understand this is through sports. Imagine a soccer team where every player constantly switches positions every few minutes. The goalkeeper becomes a striker, the striker becomes a defender, the defender becomes a goalkeeper. The team would be chaotic, performance would suffer. Now imagine each player mastering a specific role. Everyone understands their responsibility, everyone develops expertise, the team performs better. The same principle applies to economies. Specialization allows people to become experts. Experts produce more. Higher production creates more wealth. What's fascinating is that this process didn't happen because someone sat down and designed the entire system. It developed naturally over time. People realized they could become more effective by focusing on what they do best. Then they traded with others who specialized in different things. The more trade expanded, the more specialization became possible. And the more specialization increased, the more productive society became. This created a powerful cycle. Specialization increases productivity. Higher productivity creates more goods and services. More goods and services improve living standards. Improved living standards create opportunities for even greater specialization. The cycle continues. Look around your own community. You'll see examples everywhere. A coffee shop employee doesn't roast coffee beans, manufacture espresso machines, design the building, and grow the coffee plants. They focus on serving customers. Meanwhile, thousands of other specialists handle the other parts of the process. Because everyone concentrates on specific tasks, the entire system operates efficiently. The same principle explains why modern economies are so much wealthier than economies from centuries ago. Most people assume technological progress is the main reason. Technology certainly matters, but technology often becomes powerful because specialization exists. Specialized workers build specialized tools. Specialized engineers create specialized machines. Specialized researchers make specialized discoveries. Division of labor doesn't just increase productivity, it accelerates innovation. The more people focus on specific problems, the better they become at solving them. This helps explain why modern economies can produce an astonishing amount of wealth compared to earlier societies. A medieval farmer spent most of his life producing enough food to survive. A modern worker can contribute to systems that generate products and services for millions of people. That's not because modern workers are necessarily smarter. It's because they operate inside highly specialized economic networks. Adam Smith understood this before almost anyone else. He saw that prosperity wasn't simply about working harder, it was about organizing work more effectively. A person working 12 hours a day can only accomplish so much alone, but thousands of specialized people cooperating together can create extraordinary results. That's one of the great lessons of the wealth of nations. We often think wealth comes from money. Smith argued that wealth comes from productivity, and productivity grows when people specialize. But this raises another important question. If specialization is so powerful, why does it happen in the first place? Why do people naturally divide tasks and focus on different roles? What drives human beings to cooperate with complete strangers? Adam Smith believes the answer lies in something deeply human, our natural tendency to trade, exchange, and make deals with one another. And that idea becomes the focus of the next chapter of the story. In the previous part, we talked about Adam Smith's famous pen factory and how specialization can dramatically increase productivity. But that raises an important question. Why does specialization work so well? Why can 10 people focusing on separate tasks produce far more than 10 people each trying to do everything themselves? According to Adam Smith, the answer comes down to 3 powerful advantages. These advantages may seem simple, but together they helped create the modern world. Let's break them down. Reason number 1, repetition builds skill. Think about the first time you tried something new. Maybe it was driving a car. Maybe it was cooking. Maybe it was using a piece of software at work. At first, everything felt slow and awkward. You had to think about every step. You made mistakes. You hesitated. But after doing it repeatedly, something changed. The task became easier, faster, more natural. Your brain stopped treating it as something unfamiliar. You developed skill. This is exactly what happens when workers specialize. When someone performs the same task over and over, they become extremely efficient at it. Their movements become smoother, their judgment improves, they notice small details that beginners miss, they learn shortcuts, they solve problems faster. Over time, their productivity increases dramatically. Imagine a barber who cuts hair every day for 10 years. Compare that person to someone who cuts hair once every 6 months. The difference in skill would be obvious. The same principle applies to almost every profession. Specialization allows people to master their craft, and mastery leads to higher productivity. This idea is so common today that we often overlook it, but in Adam Smith's time, it was a revolutionary observation. He realized that expertise doesn't appear magically, it develops through repetition, and repetition becomes possible when people focus on specific tasks. Reason number 2, you stop wasting time switching between tasks. Now think about your own workday. Maybe you've experienced something like this. You're focused on one task, then a message pops up, you switch to answering emails, a few minutes later someone calls, then you check social media, then you return to your original project, then another interruption appears. By the end of the day, you've been busy for hours, but somehow accomplished very little. Modern psychologists call this context switching. Every time you move from one task to another, your brain needs time to refocus. That transition costs energy, it costs attention, and it costs productivity. Adam Smith noticed a similar effect centuries ago. He observed that workers lose time whenever they constantly change activities. A worker making an entire product alone must repeatedly switch tools, materials, and mental focus. Those transitions may seem small, but over hundreds of repetitions, they add up. Specialization removes much of that waste. Instead of constantly changing roles, workers stay focused on one specific task. Their tools remain ready, their attention remains focused, their workflow remains smooth. Imagine a professional chef preparing hundreds of meals. Now imagine that same chef stopping every few minutes to clean the dining room, answer phone calls, repair equipment, and process payments. Productivity would collapse. Specialization allows people to stay in their zone of expertise, and that dramatically improves efficiency. Even today, some of the most successful people understand this principle. They protect their focus, they reduce unnecessary switching, they spend more time doing what they do best. The lesson hasn't changed in over 250 years. Focus creates efficiency. Reason number 3, specialization encourages innovation. This third advantage may be the most important of all. When people spend years performing the same task, they start looking for better ways to do it. They notice inefficiencies, they spot opportunities for improvement, they invent new tools, they develop new methods, they find shortcuts. In other words, specialization fuels innovation. Imagine a worker who spends every day lifting heavy boxes. After enough time, that worker may start asking questions. Is there an easier way to move these boxes? Can I build a device that helps? Can I redesign the process? That curiosity often leads to inventions. Throughout history, many technological breakthroughs came from people trying to improve the specific work they performed every day. Specialists understand problems deeply, and deep understanding often leads to creative solutions. Look at modern industries. Software engineers create better software because they spend years writing code. Doctors develop better treatments because they spend years studying disease. Engineers build better machines because they spend years solving technical problems. The more focused someone's expertise becomes, the more likely they are to discover improvements. This creates a powerful cycle. Specialization increases skill. Greater skill reveals opportunities for innovation. Innovation increases productivity. Higher productivity creates more wealth. Then the cycle repeats. The hidden secret behind modern prosperity. When Adam Smith combined these three ideas, he revealed something extraordinary. Specialization works because people are able to become highly skilled, eliminate wasted time, and create new innovations. Each advantage strengthens the others, and together they produce enormous gains in productivity. Today, we often take this for granted. We walk into a supermarket filled with thousands of products. We order items online and receive them within days. We use technologies that would have seemed like science fiction just a few generations ago. But behind all of these conveniences lies the same principle Adam Smith described in The Wealth of Nations. Millions of people specializing in specific tasks and working together through vast networks of cooperation. The modern world wasn't built by isolated individuals, it was built by specialists. And the more society allows people to focus on what they do best, the more productive and prosperous that society tends to become. But another mystery remains. If specialization is so powerful, how did it begin? Why would people choose to focus on one task instead of doing everything themselves? What motivates individuals to depend on complete strangers for most of the things they need? Adam Smith believed the answer wasn't government orders, it wasn't force, it wasn't central planning. It was something much more natural, a uniquely human tendency that exists in every marketplace, every business deal, and every everyday transaction. The simple desire to exchange one thing for another. And that idea is where the next chapter of The Wealth of Nations begins. At this point in The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith had already explained something remarkable. Societies become richer when people specialize. The more people focus on specific tasks, the more productive they become. But there is a problem. Specialization creates dependence. If you're a farmer and all you do is grow wheat, how do you get shoes? How do you get clothing? How do you get tools? How do you get a house? You can't produce everything yourself. The moment you specialize, you become dependent on other people. So here's the question. Why would anyone choose to live this way? Why would people willingly depend on strangers? According to Adam Smith, the answer lies in one of the most important characteristics of human nature, our natural tendency to exchange, our desire to trade, our ability to make deals. Smith famously argued that this tendency is uniquely human. Animals cooperate in certain ways. They live in groups, they hunt together, they protect one another, but they do not engage in trade the way humans do. You've never seen two dogs negotiate a business transaction. You've never seen one bird offer food in exchange for building materials. Animals can cooperate. Humans can cooperate through exchange, and that changes everything. Think about what happens every time you buy a cup of coffee. You walk into a cafe, you hand over money, the barista gives you coffee. Neither of you knows each other personally. Neither of you owes the other a favor, yet both sides walk away satisfied. You get the coffee you wanted, the cafe gets the money it wanted. Both parties benefit. That simple transaction may seem ordinary, but it represents one of the most powerful forces in human history. Trade allows strangers to cooperate. Without trade, civilization as we know it would be impossible. Imagine trying to survive completely on your own. You would need to grow food, build shelter, make clothing, create tools, produce energy, find clean water, protect yourself, repair everything when it breaks. The amount of work would be overwhelming. Most people would spend nearly all their time meeting basic survival needs. Now imagine a society where people specialize and trade. One person grows food, another builds houses, another makes clothing, another repairs machines, another provides health care. Everyone focuses on what they do best, then they exchange with one another. Suddenly, life becomes far more productive, far more comfortable, far more prosperous. This is why trade is so important. Trade allows specialization, and specialization creates wealth. In fact, Smith believed that the division of labor we discussed earlier exists largely because of trade. Think about it. Why would someone spend years becoming an expert baker if they couldn't exchange bread for everything else they need? Why would someone become a software developer if they couldn't trade their skills for food, housing, and transportation? Specialization only makes sense when exchange is possible. The two ideas are connected. No trade, no specialization. No specialization, no massive productivity gains. No productivity gains, no modern prosperity. This is one of the central insights of the wealth of nations. The entire system works because people voluntarily exchange value with one another. And here's where Smith introduces another fascinating idea. Most cooperation doesn't happen because people are generous. It happens because people pursue their own interests. That statement sometimes surprises people. Many assume society works because everyone is trying to help each other. Smith saw things differently. He believed self-interest plays a major role in economic life. His most famous observation can be summarized like this: "You don't get your dinner because the butcher, baker, and brewer care about your well-being. You get your dinner because they care about theirs." The baker wakes up early because he wants to earn a living. The butcher works hard because he wants customers. The brewer wants to sell more products. Their motivation is not necessarily charity, it's self-interest. Yet somehow society benefits. This is one of Smith's brilliant observations. People don't need to love strangers to cooperate with them. They simply need to exchange value. If both sides benefit, the transaction happens, and millions of these transactions occurring every day create an incredibly complex network of cooperation. Think about your breakfast this morning. Maybe you had bread, coffee, eggs, fruit. Each item likely came from different regions, produced by different workers, transported by different companies, sold by different businesses. Thousands of people contributed to your breakfast. Most of them have never met you. Many of them live in different countries, yet their work somehow reached your table. How? Trade. Not central planning, not personal relationships. Trade. Voluntary exchange connects people across cities, countries, and continents. And the larger those networks become, the greater the opportunities for specialization. A local carpenter can serve an entire city. A software developer can serve millions of users worldwide. A manufacturer can sell products across the globe. Trade expands the market, and larger markets encourage greater specialization. Greater specialization increases productivity, and higher productivity creates more wealth. This cycle helps explain why some societies become incredibly prosperous. As markets grow, opportunities grow. As opportunities grow, specialization increases. As specialization increases, living standards improve. What started as simple exchange eventually becomes a powerful engine of economic growth. Today, we often take this system for granted. We click a button online and a package appears at our door. We order food and someone delivers it. We buy products made thousands of miles away without thinking twice. But beneath all these conveniences lies the same principle Adam Smith described more than 2 centuries ago. Human beings have a natural tendency to trade, and that tendency allows millions of strangers to cooperate in ways that no single person could ever achieve alone. But this growing system of exchange created a new challenge. As trade expanded, people needed a more efficient way to exchange value. Bartering worked when societies were small, but as economies became larger and more complex, barter started causing problems. They needed something better, something everyone would accept, something that could make trade easier. Something we now use every single day: money. And that's exactly where the next chapter of The Wealth of Nations takes us. Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where money no longer exists. No cash, no credit cards, no bank accounts, no digital payments, nothing. If you want a loaf of bread, you have to trade something you own. If you need a haircut, you must offer something in return. If you want a new phone, you need to find someone willing to exchange it for whatever you happen to have. At first, this might sound manageable. After all, people traded goods long before money existed. But the more you think about it, the more complicated it becomes. And this is exactly the problem that fascinated Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. As societies became more specialized and trade expanded, people needed a better way to exchange value. That need eventually gave birth to one of the most important inventions in human history: money. The problem with barter. Let's start with a simple example. Imagine you're a farmer. You raise chickens. One day you decide you need a new pair of shoes. So you go to the local shoemaker and offer him 3 chickens. But there's a problem. The shoemaker doesn't want chickens. Maybe he already has enough food. Maybe he wants firewood. Maybe he wants wool. Now you're stuck. Even though you have something valuable, you can't make the trade. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants. Both people must want exactly what the other person is offering at the same time. And that's surprisingly difficult. Imagine trying to buy a laptop with potatoes, or pay your rent with fish, or purchasing a car using stacks of firewood. The system quickly becomes inefficient. As trade grows larger and more complex, barter becomes a major obstacle. People waste time searching for trading partners. Negotiations become difficult. Prices become confusing. Economic activity slows down. A growing society needs something better. The birth of money. According to Adam Smith, money emerged naturally from trade itself. No king sat down one day and invented money from scratch. No government official suddenly decided what everyone should use. Instead, people gradually discovered that certain goods were widely accepted in exchange. These goods became a bridge between buyers and sellers. Rather than trading directly for what they wanted, people first traded for something that everyone else was willing to accept. Over time, these widely accepted items became money. Different societies used different forms. Some used cattle, others used salt. Some used shells, others used tobacco. In various parts of history, people have even used tea, beads, and animal skins. What mattered wasn't the specific object. What mattered was acceptance. If enough people believed an item could be exchanged later for something valuable, it could function as money. Eventually, precious metals became especially popular. Gold and silver had several advantages. They were durable, easy to divide, easy to transport, difficult to counterfeit, and most importantly, people trusted them. As trade expanded, gold and silver became common forms of money across much of the world. Money doesn't create wealth. Now here's where Adam Smith made an important distinction. Many people confused money with wealth. Smith argued they are not the same thing. Money is useful, extremely useful, but money itself is not wealth. Money is a tool, a medium of exchange, a way to facilitate trade. Real wealth still comes from production. Think about it this way. Imagine you're stranded on a deserted island with a suitcase containing $10 million. What can you do with it? Can you eat it? Can you build a shelter with it? Can you use it to create clean water? Of course not. On that island, the money is almost worthless. Now imagine instead that you have food, tools, medicine, clean water, and useful skills. Those things have real value. This was one of Smith's key insights. Money helps us exchange wealth. It is not wealth itself. The real wealth comes from the goods and services people create. This idea remains incredibly relevant today. People often focus on money as if it were the ultimate goal. But Smith would remind us that money is only valuable because it represents access to real products and services. Without production, money loses its meaning. How money changed civilization. Once money entered the picture, everything became easier. Trade expanded, markets grew, specialization increased, economic growth accelerated. Imagine a carpenter. Before money, he had to find people willing to exchange goods directly for furniture. After money, he could simply sell furniture for cash, then use that cash to buy whatever he needed: food, clothing, tools, housing. The transaction became simpler. The market became larger. Opportunities multiplied. Money allowed people to focus on what they did best. And because specialization became easier, productivity increased. This created a chain reaction. More specialization, more production, more trade, more wealth. The modern economy began taking shape. Today, this process operates on a scale Adam Smith could barely imagine. A software developer in India can create an app purchased by customers in Brazil. A manufacturer in China can sell products to consumers in Ireland. An entrepreneur in the United States can hire talent from around the world. Money makes these exchanges possible. It acts as the common language of trade. Without it, modern global commerce would be nearly impossible. Why trust matters. Money works because people trust it. That's the hidden foundation beneath every transaction. When you accept money, you're trusting that someone else will accept it later. The paper itself has little intrinsic value. The numbers on a banking app are simply digital records, yet people accept them every day. Why? Because society collectively trusts the system. That trust allows trade to happen smoothly. Without trust, economic activity slows down. With trust, markets flourish. In many ways, money is one of humanity's largest cooperative projects. Billions of people participate in it every day. Most never think about it, yet it helps coordinate an enormous amount of economic activity. The bigger picture. Adam Smith didn't see money as the source of prosperity. He saw it as a tool that helped prosperity grow. Money solved the problems of barter. It expanded trade. It encouraged specialization. And it helped productive societies become even more productive. But once money exists, another question naturally appears. If everything can be bought and sold, how are prices determined? Why does one product cost more than another? Why is something essential often cheaper than something relatively unnecessary can be incredibly expensive? Why is a bottle of water often cheaper than a diamond, even though water is far more important to survival? That puzzle would become one of the most famous questions in economics. And in the next chapter, Adam Smith begins exploring exactly how prices are formed and what value really means. By this point in The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith has explained some of the most important building blocks of wealth. People specialize, they trade, money makes exchange easier, productivity increases, societies become richer. But now we arrive at one of the biggest questions in economics. Why do things cost what they cost? Why is one product cheap while another is expensive? Why can two objects that look similar have completely different prices? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly gives something value? These questions seem simple at first, but the deeper you go, the more fascinating they become. And Adam Smith knew that understanding value was essential if you wanted to understand how an economy actually works. Value is not as simple as it looks. Imagine you're walking through a shopping mall. You see a basic white t-shirt selling for $10. A few stores away, you see another white t-shirt selling for $100. At first glance, they appear almost identical. Both cover your body, both keep you comfortable, both perform essentially the same function, yet one costs 10 times more than the other. Why? Or consider another example. A famous painting can sell for millions of dollars. A loaf of bread might cost only a few dollars. Yet if you're starving, the bread could literally save your life. The painting cannot. So why is the painting worth more? Questions like these led economists to think carefully about the meaning of value. Adam Smith noticed that people often confuse two very different kinds of value: use value versus exchange value. Smith made a distinction that became one of the most famous ideas in economics. He argued that things can have use value, exchange value. Use value refers to usefulness, how much practical benefit something provides. Exchange value refers to what people are willing to give up in order to obtain it. In other words, its market price. Sometimes these two types of value move together, but sometimes they don't, and that's where things get interesting. The water and diamond puzzle. Smith used a famous example that economists still discuss today. Water is incredibly useful. You need it to survive. Without it, life ends quickly. Its use value is enormous. Diamonds, on the other hand, are mostly luxury items. They look beautiful. They can symbolize status, but they are not essential for survival. Yet in most situations, diamonds cost far more than water. Why? If usefulness alone determined price, water should be one of the most expensive things on Earth, but it usually isn't. This became known as the water-diamond paradox. At first glance, it seems like a contradiction, but the answer reveals something important about markets. Scarcity changes everything. Imagine standing beside a massive freshwater lake. Water is everywhere. There is plenty available. Getting another bottle of water isn't difficult because supply is abundant, so price stays low. Now imagine finding a large diamond. Diamonds are far rarer. Finding another one is much more difficult. Because supply is limited, people are willing to pay more. Scarcity plays a huge role in determining exchange value. The harder something is to obtain relative to demand, the more valuable it tends to become in the marketplace. This doesn't mean usefulness is irrelevant. It means that usefulness alone doesn't determine price. Markets care about both desire and availability. That's why rare collectibles can sell for enormous amounts of money. That's why beachfront property often costs more than inland property. That's why limited edition products attract buyers. Scarcity influences what people are willing to pay. The role of labor. Adam Smith also believed labor played a major role in value. In simpler societies, he argued, the amount of work required to produce something often influenced its worth. Think about two products. One takes an hour to make, the other takes 100 hours. All else equal, the second product is likely to command a higher price. Why? Because more effort, skill, and resources were required to create it. This became known as the labor theory of value, and later economists would debate and refine it extensively. While modern economics has evolved beyond Adam Smith's original formulation, his insight remained important. Producing things require human effort, and effort has economic significance. Market prices are constantly moving. One of Adam Smith's most important observations was that prices are not fixed. They constantly change. Supply changes, demand changes, consumer preferences change, technology changes, competition changes. As these forces shift, prices move. Think about what happens when a new smartphone launches. At first, demand is high. People rush to buy it. Prices remain strong. Months later, newer models appear, demand cools, prices often fall. The product hasn't physically changed, but market conditions have. Or consider seasonal products. Fresh strawberries may be cheaper during harvest season and more expensive at other times of the year. Again, supply and demand influence price. Markets are dynamic. Prices act like signals. They communicate information about scarcity, demand, and economic conditions. Why prices matter. Many people think prices are just numbers attached to products. Adam Smith saw something deeper. Prices help coordinate economic activity. When prices rise, producers often receive a signal that consumers want more of something. When prices fall, producers receive a signal that demand may be weakening. Millions of buyers and sellers make decisions based on these signals every day. No single person controls the entire process, yet somehow resources flow towards areas where they are most needed. This insight would eventually lead to one of Adam Smith's most famous ideas about markets, which we'll explore later: looking beneath the price tag. The next time you walk through a store, remember that every price tag tells a story. Behind each number are countless factors: human labor, scarcity, consumer demand, competition, production costs, market conditions. Prices are not random. They emerge from millions of interactions between buyers and sellers. Adam Smith understood that if we want to understand wealth, trade, and prosperity, we must first understand value. And value is far more complex than it appears at first glance. But another major question remains. Once goods are produced and sold, where does the money go? Who receives the wealth created by economic activity? Why do workers earn wages? Why do business owners earn profits? Why do landowners collect rent? How is society's wealth divided among different groups? Those questions lead us directly into the next major section of The Wealth of Nations, one of Adam Smith's most influential explanations of how income is distributed throughout an economy. So far in The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith has shown us how wealth is created. People specialize. They trade. Money makes exchange easier. Markets determine prices. Productivity grows. Society becomes richer. But now we arrive at another important question. Once wealth is created, who gets it? When a product is sold, where does the money actually go? Imagine you buy a cup of coffee. You hand over $5. That money doesn't simply disappear. It gets divided among different people. The employee who made the coffee gets paid. The owner of the cafe earns income. The landlord who owns the building receives rent. The coffee supplier gets paid. The trucking company earns money transporting the beans. One simple transaction triggers a chain of payments throughout the economy. Adam Smith wanted to understand this process. He believed that most income in society eventually falls into three major categories: wages, profits, rent. Understanding these three categories helps explain how wealth moves through an economy. Wages, the reward for labor. Let's start with wages. This is the easiest category to understand. When people work, they receive compensation. A teacher teaches students. A plumber repairs pipes. A nurse treats patients. A mechanic fixes cars. In exchange for their labor, they earn wages. According to Adam Smith, wages are the reward for work. At first glance, this seems obvious, but Smith wanted to understand what determines wage levels. Why do some jobs pay more than others? Why do wages rise in some societies and remain low in others? Many people assume employers simply decide what workers earn. Smith believed the reality was more complicated. Wages are influenced by supply and demand. If a particular skill is scarce and highly valued, wages often rise. If many workers can perform the same task, wages may remain lower. Think about software engineers. As technology became increasingly important, demand for skilled programmers grew rapidly. Companies competed for talent. Wages increased. The same principle applies across industries. Skills that are difficult to replace often command higher compensation. But Smith also noticed something else. Workers tend to earn more in growing economies. When businesses expand and new opportunities appear, employers compete for labor. That competition often pushes wages upward. In prosperous societies, workers generally benefit from economic growth. This was an important observation because many people in Smith's time assumed that workers becoming wealthier somehow harmed society. Smith argued the opposite. Rising wages were often a sign of a healthy, expanding economy. Profits, the reward for risk. Now let's talk about profits. Profits are often misunderstood. Some people see profits as money that simply appears out of nowhere. Smith saw them differently. Imagine someone opens a restaurant. Before serving a single customer, they must invest money. They rent a building, buy equipment, purchase ingredients, hire employees, pay utility bills, handle countless expenses. And there is no guarantee of success. The restaurant might thrive, or it might fail. The owner takes that risk. If the business succeeds, the owner earns a profit. If it fails, the owner absorbs the loss. According to Adam Smith, profit is the reward for investing capital and accepting uncertainty. Without the possibility of profit, many businesses would never exist. Few people would risk their savings if there were no potential reward. Think about some of the world's largest companies. At one point, they were simply ideas. Someone took a chance, someone invested resources, someone accepted uncertainty. Profits encourage people to take those risks, and when successful businesses create useful products and services, society often benefits as well. That doesn't mean every business owner becomes rich. Far from it. Many businesses fail. Many investments lose money. Profit exists because risk exists. The possibility of reward is tied directly to the possibility of loss. Rent, the reward for ownership. The third category is rent. When most people hear the word rent today, they think of apartments. But Smith used the concept more broadly. Rent refers to income earned from owning valuable land or resources. Imagine two farmers. One owns fertile land, the other owns rocky, unproductive land. The farmer with fertile land can often produce more crops using the same amount of effort. That extra productivity creates additional value. Part of that value may flow to the landowner as rent. The same principle exists in cities. A small shop located in a busy downtown district may generate more revenue than an identical shop located in a remote area. Why? Location. The location itself has value. As a result, landlords can often charge higher rents for desirable properties. Smith observed that landowners could earn income not because of their labor, but because of ownership. Certain resources possess economic value simply due to their scarcity and usefulness. Every price contains three pieces. One of Smith's most influential ideas was that many prices can ultimately be broken down into these three components: wages, profits, rent. Think about a loaf of bread. Part of the price helps pay workers throughout the supply chain. Part contributes to business profits. Part may go towards land costs and property expenses. The same is true for countless products and services. Behind every purchase lies a network of payments flowing to workers, investors, and property owners. This framework gave Smith a way to understand how wealth is distributed across society. Why this matters? The debate over wages, profits, and rent continues today. People still argue about how wealth should be distributed. They debate income inequality. They discuss corporate profits. They question housing costs. Many of these conversations can be traced back to the same questions Adam Smith was exploring over 250 years ago. Who creates wealth? Who receives wealth? How should economic rewards be divided? These questions remain relevant because every economy must answer them in one form or another. Smith didn't believe these categories were enemies fighting each other. He saw them as interconnected parts of a larger system. Workers need businesses. Businesses need workers. Both rely on land, infrastructure, and resources. When the system functions well, all three groups can benefit from economic growth. The bigger picture. At this stage of the wealth of nations, Adam Smith has built an impressive framework. People specialize. Specialization increases productivity. Trade allows cooperation. Money makes exchange easier. Markets help determine prices. And the resulting wealth flows through society as wages, profits, and rent. Piece by piece, he's explaining how an economy actually works. But one final question remains before we conclude the first major section of the book. If individuals are pursuing their own interests, making their own decisions, and competing with one another, why doesn't the entire system collapse into chaos? How do millions of strangers coordinate their activities without a central planner directing every move? Why do markets often seem capable of organizing themselves? Adam Smith's answer would become one of the most famous ideas in economic history, an idea that continues to influence business, politics, and economics to this day. The idea of the market's invisible hand. We've covered a lot of ground throughout the first book of The Wealth of Nations. At first, it may have seemed like Adam Smith was discussing a collection of separate topics: production, specialization, trade, money, prices, wages, profits, rent. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you realize something important. These ideas are not separate at all. They're pieces of the same puzzle. And that puzzle answers one of the most important questions in human history. How do societies become wealthy? The answer Adam Smith gives is surprisingly elegant. Wealth is not created by gold. It is not created by government decree. It is not created by printing money. Wealth is created when human beings become more productive. Everything in Book 1 ultimately points back to this single idea. It starts with production. Remember where we began. For centuries, many people believed that national wealth came from accumulating precious metals. The more gold a country possessed, the richer it was thought to be. Smith challenged that belief. He argued that real wealth comes from production. A nation becomes prosperous when it can produce large amounts of useful goods and services. Food, housing, transportation, technology, healthcare, education. These are the things that improve people's lives. Money helps us exchange them, but the products themselves are the true source of wealth. This idea sounds obvious today, but at the time it was revolutionary. Specialization changes everything. The next piece of the puzzle was specialization. Smith's famous pen factory demonstrated something remarkable. People working together and focusing on specific tasks can produce vastly more than people working alone. This wasn't a small improvement, it was a massive leap in productivity. Specialization allows workers to develop expertise, avoid wasting time switching tasks, and discover better ways of doing things. As specialization increases, productivity rises, and when productivity rises, society produces more wealth. This remains one of the most powerful economic principles ever discovered. Trade makes specialization possible, but specialization creates dependence. A person who spends all day making shoes still needs food. A farmer still needs tools. A doctor still needs clothing. This is where trade enters the story. According to Adam Smith, human beings possess a natural tendency to exchange. We trade because both sides benefit. The shoemaker gets food, the farmer gets shoes. Both become better off. Trade allows people to focus on what they do best while obtaining everything else they need from others. Without trade, specialization would be impossible, and without specialization, modern prosperity would never have emerged. Money expands the system. As markets expanded, prices emerged as powerful signals. Prices communicate information. They tell producers what people want. They reveal scarcity. They reflect demand. They help coordinate countless economic decisions. Every day, millions of buyers and sellers make choices based on prices. No central authority needs to direct every transaction. Markets generate information naturally through voluntary exchange. This process helps resources flow toward activities that consumers value most. Wealth is shared through wages, profits, and rent. The final major piece of Book 1 explains how economic rewards are distributed. Workers earn wages, business owners earn profits, property owners earn rent. These three forms of income help explain where money goes after goods and services are produced and sold. Behind every product lies a network of people contributing labor, capital, and resources. The economy isn't just creating wealth, it's constantly distributing wealth as well. Understanding this flow is essential for understanding how society functions. The hidden pattern. Now let's put everything together. Adam Smith's logic looks something like this. People naturally want to improve their lives. They specialize in specific tasks. Specialization increases productivity. Trade allows specialization to expand. Money makes trade easier. Markets coordinate exchange. Production grows. Wealth increases. This chain of events transformed human civilization. It explains why modern societies can support billions of people while maintaining standards of living that previous generations could barely imagine. It explains why complete strangers can cooperate without ever meeting one another. It explains why prosperity tends to grow when productivity grows. Book 1 is essentially a blueprint for understanding how wealth is created. Why these ideas still matter. What makes Adam Smith's work remarkable is that many of these ideas remain relevant more than 2 centuries later. Technology has changed, industries have changed, global trade has changed, but the core principles still shape the modern economy. Companies still become successful by creating value. Workers still increase their earnings by developing useful skills. Businesses still compete by becoming more productive. Markets still coordinate billions of transactions every day. The world looks very different from the one Smith knew, yet many of the forces driving prosperity remain surprisingly similar. The end of Book 1. By the end of Book 1 of The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith has accomplished something extraordinary. He has taken one of the most complex subjects imaginable, the creation of wealth, and broken it into understandable parts. He has shown how specialization, trade, money, prices, and incentives work together to create prosperity. But Smith isn't finished, not even close. Book 1 explains how wealth is created. The next stage of the journey asks a different question. Once wealth exists, how does capital help economies grow even faster? Why do some societies accumulate productive assets while others struggle? What role do saving, investment, and business expansion play in long-term prosperity? Those questions lead directly into Book 2, where Adam Smith begins exploring the nature of capital itself and why capital accumulation may be one of the most powerful drivers of economic growth ever discovered.